Yo, what's going on, guys? And today, yes, you saw the title, and I first want to say the Rockets have said Amen Thompson is untouchable. All right, so no Amen Thompson deals. And they have consistently said whenever there's been reports about the Rockets being connected to a star player like Giannis, Kevin Durant, or somebody, that they won't trade anybody from the young core. So before we start today's video, if you're a Spurs fan, as they go into the next direction with Mitch Johnson as head coach, who went 31-45, and the Rockets will look to become contenders perennially. I want to hear your thoughts. What do you guys think the trade should be, and if they should even do this? Hit that like, comment, and subscribe button. As you guys saw at the beginning of this video, the report was actually coming from Brian Windhorst on Get Up, saying basically that the Spurs and Rockets could go after them. And I put together two trades that I thought, if either of these teams do have interest in him, this is the trade that I think, as the Milwaukee Bucks can't rebuild, as they don't control their draft, this allows them to still be somewhat competitive while the other two teams don't give up like an arm and a leg. I'd like to hear your guys' thoughts down below. So Spurs get Giannis and Pat Connaughton for Keldon Johnson, Devin Vassell, Jeremy Sohan, Malachi Branham, Blake Wesley, draft capital. You guys can decide what the draft capital is. I feel like everyone's definition on what draft capital in terms of compensation is correct is always so far in discretion, or like in consensus. So you can choose what you think is correct valued draft capital. And then for the Rockets, Giannis, Tyler Smith, and Chris Livingston for Jalen Green, Jabari Smith, Jock Landale, or Reed Shepard if they want more in draft capital. So we'll break them both down. I'm going to start with the Spurs, because I feel like the Spurs, I also feel like, would you even go to a Texas team, or would you want to go to a big market? That's always what I want to hear. But let's just get right here and talk about the rationale for each of these trades. Following the Bucks' first round exit, Damian Lillard's Achilles tear, and a depleted roster with no control over future draft capital. So why would the Bucks do this? First, they would only do this if Giannis Antetokounmpo requests to trade out. They're not going to just go and do this. No, they're only going to do this if Giannis says, I want out. So first off, understand, we're only doing this if Giannis says, I want out. I don't want to be here anymore. So Damian Lillard is, torn Achilles, removes Milwaukee's floor general all-star for likely the entirety of the 2025-26 season. It'd be a miracle if he makes it for the end and is still effective for the playoffs. Look, the Bucks were 11th in offensive rating, 115.5 points per game, but their defense, particularly on the perimeter, was aging and exploitable in the playoffs. The roster instability. Only Kyle Kuzma, AJ Green, Ajax, Chris Livingston, Pat Connaughton's going to opt in, and this year rookie, next year second year player, Tyler Smith are under contract. Brook Lopez is a free agent who's more than likely not coming back, and he's in decline. Bobby Portis most likely won't come back, because I think he'll get more money elsewhere. Same thing with Kevin Porter Jr. He's not going to accept that option. So those guys don't even have, draft picks due to the Drew Holiday and Damian Lillard trades. And a true rebuild is not possible. It's not viable. So Milwaukee is going to have to retool around younger, cost-controlled talent and establish some sort of two-way depth. And that's what's going to have to happen if they're going to want to be competitive in, at least for the foreseeable future, and not have the bottom go out, which I'd understand, because it's Milwaukee. It's not the biggest market. So if we do the Spurs one, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Pat Connaughton is an expiring that they could flip the Spurs or keep. He has playoff experience, championship pedigree. And the Bucks get Jalen Green. He was just extended. He's an explosive scorer. Best case scenario, I think he gets to a level that's like Zach LaVine, Bradley Beal, which is an all-star. And then you have Jabari Smith, who had a great season this year, kind of in this like six-man role, switch big, 3-and-D guy, who's a two-way stretch forward, who's extension eligible this coming year in October. Then Jock Landale's non-guaranteed, or Reed Shepard if additional value was needed. And then draft capital. Houston In this case, 114.3 points per game, was one of the league's least efficient teams despite high shot volume of 93.4 field goal attempts, sixth in the league. They need someone like Giannis to anchor the offense with paint scoring to help be a constant, I guess, vertical spacer. I know people are going to be like, what about Alperen Şengün? That's exact. So Alperen Şengün is like the playmaker, offensive, like orchestrator, and he's shown he can play with another offensive guy like Steven Adams, and you would have the vertical spacing that Giannis Antetokounmpo creates being a lob thrower. Imagine, Şengün throwing Giannis lobs from the free throw line, from the elbow. All right. This is a team that was 30th in 2-point field goal percentage. And he would also give them like defensive stability, being a rim protector. While Jalen Green offers the Bucks an athletic slasher to ignite the fast break, and he's a shot creator who's still under 25 years old, which I think is freaking great when you look at it like that. While Jabari Smith provides switchable size who can guard 3 through 5 and be someone who, can shoot above league average from three. And I think that's just something that's going to be rather interesting when you look at it in those like sites. That look, I think Green and Smith isn't a bad package, and then Landale's a cost flexible rotation piece or someone you can just waive to save money. So to me, I think either of those is fine, and I don't mind either. And I want to hear your guys' opinions on what do you guys expect and why in terms of players that they could be wanting to target, or people that they maybe would rather request off the Rockets squad. So that's like something I think is like the whole like enchilada when you want to go ahead and put together some sort of, package from the Rockets, as we already, from the Rockets right there. I did say we were going to do the Spurs first, but we did the Rockets instead. And Milwaukee gets a foundational backcourt pairing with, I think, Jabari, foundational backcourt frontcourt pairing in Jabari Green and Jalen Green, as I like the ideal future having the flexibility and offensive upside with a little bit of defense. And if Shepard's substituted, the Bucks add a high IQ shooter who offsets the loss of Lillard. Now, if we look at the rest, I think San Antonio is probably thinking Victor Wembanyama with Giannis for the best defensive frontcourt in NBA history, arguably, while retaining picks and most of their core, would be pretty cool. So as we said, the other deal would be Giannis Antetokounmpo, and in this case, I think they would send Tyler Smith. Well, the other deal was Tyler Smith, Chris Livingston, and Giannis. And then you would have all those players in return. And this deal would be Pat Connaughton, or you could do either. I think either would work for either team. You could do Pat Connaughton in either trade, or you could do Chris Livingston and Tyler Smith in either trade, in your opinion. But like I said, we pivot over to, if this happens, Giannis and Victor Wembanyama would be the best defensive frontcourt, offensive frontcourt pairing in NBA history. They could also probably give more assets offensively. So Giannis Antetokounmpo, either Pat Connaughton or Tyler Smith, Chris Livingston, just those two. Keldon Johnson, a versatile scorer. He's okay on defense on a team-friendly deal. Devin Vassell, a guy who's recently extended on who's a two-way wing with some ball handling. Jeremy Sohan becomes extension eligible in October. He's a defensive glue guy who had a career year. Malachi Branham's a shot-creating swingman, and Blake Wesley is like a developmental, shot-creating guard with two-way potential and then draft capital. And look, this is a team that, yes, they had the number one offense in terms of number one bench scoring, but they weren't a great offense. They had a high assist total. Their offensive system's in place, but they lack a true superstar next to Victor Wembanyama. Like, they need someone to be like Victor's like co-star, or Victor to be the co-star. So as Victor continues to develop, he can be Robin until he becomes Batman or Nightwing. And Giannis and Wembanyama give them this 2-generational defender, while also 2-generational offensive players, and the physicality that they sorely lack. For the Bucks, the package provides them better depth and a lot more defensive versatility than the Houston deal. You get a 20-point per game scorer and a 3-point shooter and a defender, and Vassell Sohan gives you a glue guy and a rebounder and a guy with a career year shooting. You get a veteran and a proven player, an aggressive slasher in Keldon Johnson. And then Braun and Wesley are upside swings to develop in a retooled rotation. So I think these players are all cost controlled. They'll eventually be extension eligible, giving Milwaukee a lot more financial cap flexibility and a 2-year window to assess the fit before deciding on some of their futures. So I think this, in my opinion, the Spurs deal would be the best way to remain competitive short term without Giannis or Lillard, while still getting some young talent to control and not tanking without picks. So if you look at both deals, it's going to be hard to avoid a hard rebuild is what they're going to want to do, since the Bucks lack draft capital and their future draft control. Pivoting towards more two-way young talent with upside, especially guys that are going to be on team-friendly deals, is another big thing. And to build a functional post-Lillard Giannis roster that could compete or be flipped again is what you want to do. So yeah, those are like my 2 deals right there. We have for those 2 rumored situations, and if you guys want, I'll have another video coming out later doing a full breakdown of all the other possible trades that could be there. Yeah, so I want to hear you guys' thoughts. Again, a little confusion about the Pat Connaughton, Tyler Smith, and Chris Livingston. I think it's just flippable. I think the Bucks would want to trade Pat. Other teams would be like, just give us Chris and Tyler. We'd rather get the cheap contracts. Yeah, that's just my 2 thoughts. Let me know.